frustrated about situations that are beneath you. Trying to get you to lay with people who are, you don't want to say amen right there, but I know the statistics. Trying to get you to deal with people who are beneath you. And at times like that, you need to lay hands on yourself and say, don't come down, baby, be seated in the presence of the Lord. Is there anybody who has ever got up in your heavenly place and you wanted to sit down, you wanted to deal with, cuss somebody out, talk crazy to them? When you do, say, baby, be seated in the presence of the Lord. You're in heavenly places. When you want to talk crazy to that spouse, no, baby, be seated in the presence of the Lord. When you want to go back and forth with those kids, baby, be seated in the presence of the Lord. When you want to disrespect that manager who's disrespecting you, don't trip. Be seated in the presence of the Lord. You may be seated. You may be seated. You have to sometimes usher yourself. You may be seated. You may be, I know you want to get up, but you may be seated. I know you want to clown, but you may be seated. You can be seated in the presence of the Lord, because I'm not going to get up from with him to come down and sin with you. No, the devil is a lie. I'm sitting with him, and I prefer to sit with him instead of staying arguing with you. You may be seated in the presence of the Lord. You got to tell yourself sometimes. And some of the best messages I preach to myself. Jessie, you can be seated. I know you want to clown, but be seated. I know you want to trip, but be seated. I know they're getting on your nerve, but be seated in the presence of the Lord. So sometimes you just have to be seated in the presence of the Lord, because God has shifted us from being controlled by our desires to walking and talking with him. He has shifted us. The authors Gordon Fee and Douglas Stewart put it in this way. They said that we are moved from our past enslavement to the destructive powers to our present position with Christ in the heavenly realms, where he sits enthroned above those powers. I'm going to say that again. We're moved from our past enslavement to the destructive powers of our present into a heavenly realm with Christ, where he sits enthroned above those powers. In other words, although it used to control you, with Christ you can control it. I'm going to say that again. Although it used to control you, what used to control you? What used to, every time that it emailed you, every time it texted you on your phone, every time it came by your office, it changed your mood. What used to control you? Is there anybody who's honest enough to say that there have been some days where you were out of control? Where something other than the Holy Ghost was controlling you. I mean, where alcohol controlled you, you couldn't relax without it. Where sex controlled you, you didn't care who you got it from as long as you got it. Where cigarettes controlled you, you'd stand out rain, sleet, or snow all by yourself just to get your after meal fixed. But somehow or another, Jesus stepped in and raised you to heavenly places, so that now what used to control you is being controlled by you. What used to control you is being controlled by you through the power of Jesus Christ. Oh yeah, you used to not be able to control your anger, but now you can control it. It used to control you. You used to not be able to control your eyes. They just go where they go. You used to not be able to control your thoughts, where anything that popped up, that's where your mind would go. But now you found yourself seated in heavenly places, and the grace of God has given you the strength and authority to control what has been controlling you. And if you and I are going to maximize the moment in ministry, we're going to have to be willing to be honest and tell people, yes, I've struggled. Yes, I've been broken. Yes, I've been down. But guess what, baby? God has given me control over situations that used to control me. So we can, with God's grace, gain control of areas of our life that have been controlling our progression and have been hindering our destiny, because we've changed position. See, God has worked through Christ to not only change our theology, which is what we know about God, but he's also changed our geography, which is where we are compared to God. So it's important to note, because if we step up to begin and operate in ministry, we've got to understand that we'll encounter people who know where we used to be. You will encounter people who know what you used to do. You'll see some of those people who you used to do it. Preach, Jesse, I'm trying to do it. You see, some of those people, they know where you used to be. They know what you used to do because they used to do it with you. But you got to look at them and say, baby, I know when you knew me, I'm not who you were when you dated me. I'm not who I was when you went to school with me. I'm not who I was when you worked with me. I'm not at Depressed Drive anymore, baby. I'm not at Loose Goose Lane. I'm not at Alcohol Avenue. I'm sitting in heavenly places. And there has been a change in my geography. God has showed his grace towards me. And if we're going to be placed in a new position, we'll give him a shout of praise. Is there anybody who's been placed in a new position?